The U.S. Coast Guard has seized more than $63 million in cocaine in Florida, and it came amid gunfire and a vessel catching fire and sinking. The Coast Guard posting this here on social media that more than 4,800 pounds of cocaine was offloaded at Port Everglades. That is over in Broward County, Florida, in the southern part of the state. The encounters, though, were just north of Venezuela, and this is not the first time for anything like this. I did have a chance to speak with an expert on the topic earlier today to break down exactly what is going on. Andres Martinez-Fernandez is Senior Policy Analyst for Latin America at the Heritage Foundation, joining us now to discuss all of this. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, so the Coast Guard did seize $63 million of cocaine there in Florida, and it sounds like a lot. Is it becoming more of the norm, would you say?
Well, it certainly is. We have to keep in mind that the drug trade is extremely lucrative and valued at as much as $500 billion annually globally. So it's a very high revenue, high stakes drug illicit trade that we have. And these massive shipments and high value shipments are just a small percentage of, not even a percentage, a small fraction of what we're seeing coming through the United States border and going, frankly, across the world.
And we are told that there was also a shootout involved in this incident. Does that demonstrate, I guess, how dangerous the people who are transporting these drugs can be?
Yeah, absolutely. These are, again, hardened criminals. The drug trade is one of the most vicious trades in the world, with high levels of body counts, not only in the United States, but in the countries where these drugs are produced, manufactured, and shipped through. So you see these qualities of the drug trade certainly come through as far as the United States interdiction and seizure, the confrontation of U.S. forces with some of these shipments. So it's certainly a very dangerous trade, and it's not at all surprising that when we're talking again about the values that we're seeing with these shipments, that there's an element of violence that often comes out when confronted.
Is Florida one of the main locations where we're seeing incidents like this occur? Are there other states as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So Florida, through the Caribbean, is one of the primary destinations, but really it goes throughout as far as the United States, throughout the country. Certainly the maritime drug routes, again, primarily through the Caribbean, but we also see that going through into California also, as well as far north as Canada. So it's really a very broad a network of illicit maritime routes that we've seen, and that's only talking maritime routes. Of course, there's a huge land transportation movement of illicit drugs coming through, particularly the U.S. southwest border with Mexico, and there we see all sorts of movements, not only of cocaine, which is really the predominant, particularly for maritime, that we see seizures, but the fentanyl flows, which has become such a big concern in the United States, really driving up overdose deaths up into the unfortunately over 100,000 in each year. So all these routes are very well developed, and they spread throughout the United States.
Just based on your experience, your research there, do you expect that situations like this are going to become even more common as the days, months, and years progress?
I think so. The issue is the drug trafficking trade has never been more lucrative. We've seen also in many of the countries which have traditionally been partners on combating drug trafficking and drug cultivation, we've seen a pulling back on a lot of that cooperation. In Mexico, for example, we've seen a very poor partnership in combating some of the cartels, as the government there under President Lopez Obrador has adopted a hugs, not bullets approach when it comes to cartels. And we've seen that elsewhere in Colombia, for example, where we've seen a similar pulling back on on security measures to confront what is essentially, paramilitary level organizations that are well armed and again have well developed criminal networks. So I think that this is going to continue, unfortunately, and it's all accelerated by the porousness that we see at our U.S. border with Mexico, where we, in addition to all these drugs, have migrants coming through, which are really overwhelming the CBP personnel and who are also in charge of targeting and identifying these drug shipments. So we're being overwhelmed at a time where the region, the countries in the region that are producing a lot of these drugs are not cooperating nearly as much as they need to be.
And a question that so many people ask, so I do want to kind of get your thoughts on this because we are talking about a lot of drugs. We're talking about some major seizures that happen there. So, what does happen with the drugs that are seized during these big operations?
Sure. Yeah. So it depends. Generally, as these drugs are seized, they're going to be used in some kind of judicial proceedings, a prosecution of individuals. So there will be some initial testing of the drugs to make sure that they're properly identified, and then there will usually be at least some portion of the drug seized that will be kept in storage for, again, judicial proceedings. But there are also processes to destroy those drugs, particularly when we're talking about these huge shipments that we're constantly seizing. Now that's when the U.S. seizes them. When we see other countries seize them, we have a less of a stellar track record, unfortunately, and this is an issue that we constantly have to work with, where uh, countries will seize them in partnership with the United States, will help identify a narco shipment going through, and those drugs will be taken back to the country, and eventually they disappear in the process of the custody chain, and that essentially means that it's gone back into the illicit drug trade. So this is something that we're actually actively working with the region to ensure that that's minimized, because unfortunately the corruption that we see in security forces in the region really facilitates this interchange between police seizing and these drugs ending up back in the hands of these drug traffickers.
All right. Andres Martinez-Fernandez with the Heritage Foundation. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and help break all of this down. Is there anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
Well, I think it's very important for us to be aware that this is a growing problem, and we see the fentanyl issue as this recent addition where we're really high, seeing a spike in overdoses, and this is the kind of situation where we have a porous border, we have cartels and drug traffickers that are well integrated into the U.S. Mexico corridor, and it's the kind of thing that it's only a matter of time before we see some other newer, deadlier drug introduced, and again spiking into increased overdoses even further than we're seeing now. So it's a situation that we really need to get a hold of before it gets even further out of control.
Thank you again for taking the time to join us and help break it all down. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.